Welcome to the second of the round 2 PDs for ASCC. For those who may not remember me, my name is Marnie. I'm the content coordinator for Cyber Pathways. I will be presenting in lieu of Roscoe, who is currently traveling. So this one will be very short and sweet. I will cover a couple of little bits of housekeeping first and foremost, just in regards to the round 1 marking and the round 2 as it's launched. And then Ernest will take over and give a probably very brief explanation of some of the concepts that your students will be applying for their round 2 challenges. So if there's any questions, feel free to ask. We'll be monitoring the chat. Happy to answer them as we go rather than stop it. So, yeah. So quickly, I'll go through updates. We're going to go through the basics of understanding web and web security. And then we'll do a quick Q&A at the end. Like I said, it should be very short and sweet. So, as always, we are presenting. My name is Marnie of Cyber Pathways. We have Dr. Leah Rosenberg, who is our head of content and curriculum for Cyber Pathways, and Dr. Ernest Fu, who is an associate professor with Griffith. Our very, very welcomed partners is part of ASCC 2025. So very briefly, in terms of housekeeping, round 1 marking is underway as a result of obviously the cyclone that decided it wanted to hit Southeast Queensland last week, or across the course of the last week, and just a few tech issues from a number of schools. We did issue extensions for some schools just to make sure that every student had as much of an opportunity as possible to be able to complete that. Those extensions have now all wrapped up, which means that marking has started for round 1. The marks will ideally be released at some point late this week / early next week, alongside a full formal write-up of the round 1 challenges that you are able to go through with your students. That will have the answers and some of the recommended pathways to the solutions. There are ultimately, as many students will have worked out, different ways to be able to solve different things. So we'll go through basically our recommendations or a couple of the different ways they might have gone through it as part of a formal write-up that you're able to go through. The round 1 VMs are now closed. So if you do have any questions about that, if we do anything regarding those, it will probably be a little bit later on, because obviously we have round 2 as our focus. Round 2, we have accounted for a few issues regarding the auto marking that some students would have experienced with the last round, where it was being very picky with formatting. So we have adjusted our marking to account for answer responses, which means that we will be marking and giving a little bit of feedback throughout the course of the round 2 challenge. So we'll be having a look realistically every day, every business day, going through, seeing what students have submitted and giving an idea from there regarding, okay, cool, where they would be sitting. Obviously, no full answers and marks will be released until the end of the challenge. So any feedback might be very vague or very like trying to get them in the right direction, but we will not necessarily be giving a clear yes or no regarding certain questions. Obviously, round 2 will wrap up on the 7th of April, everything permitting. So after that point, we'll be marking the results for round 2, collating the results from round 1 and round 2, and using that to determine who will be our top 16 going into round 3. So this will be communicated long before the actual start of round 3 as to which schools and which teams will have made it through. And we will do a bit more of a formal actual write-up about the round 2 challenge when we release those marks. So there is currently plans for a leaderboard as well, so students can see where they're at, which ideally will also be coming in the next couple of weeks, if not in the next week. Any questions so far? So at the moment, that will be the current will be probably off the back of the ASCC website, so the students will be able to freely access it. Unfortunately, leaderboards are not something we could easily do in Accelerate. But yeah, we will be aiming to show a full leaderboard probably off the back of the website, just so the students can all search it and go looking and have fun from there, and we will keep it updated, of course. that is everything. So we will email students, or at least we will email teachers regarding the team's results and obviously the write-up. So we'll be able to give a bit more of feedback. And we're also happy to actually discuss with the students what that feedback is, depending on how they have gone with the challenge. Most students, it's very much more the what did I get right, what did I get wrong, including within their teams. So yeah, we're happy to handle that feedback as we go. It would just be very much a once we finish marking round one, so we actually have something we can talk to them about. So at this point then, Ernest, the floor is yours.
Oh.
So I will direct your slides and you may talk.
Okay, cool. All right. Hi everybody. Hopefully this one will be reasonably short. But I guess, again, there may be some of you out there who are really familiar with web. There might be some people who are, professional web developers on the side. And so maybe you kind of know all of this stuff already. But there might be some of you who may have never seen any of this stuff before. So just going to kind of go through some of the concepts that the students might need to understand as they try to attempt the web challenge. And certainly the web challenge that we designed was, fairly educational in terms of having the kids kind of understand how the web does certain things. And so when I say the web, I actually mean the hypertext transfer protocol, which has been around for a long time now, since the late 80s, mid 80s, early 80s. Anyway, so around for a long time, but it actually has kind of developed a lot along the way. So let's go to the next slide, Marnie. All right, so this is a slide from last week, and you would remember, was it last week? Yeah, I guess it was. It was like, and we talked about the different layers inside networking, and at the application layer, there's a swag of protocols that we all use, but the one that we use probably the most is the HTTP protocol. And the HTTP protocol has two types of messages that get sent back and forward, usually from a web client, otherwise known as a browser. We send a request message and it goes to a server, and that's usually the web server. And this is a communication paradigm that is quite commonly used. The server side is the listening side. It's waiting for connections to come. And the client side is the active side, and it connects to web servers. So the thing about servers is that they're there all the time and they're forever listening. It's almost like a very patient person just waiting for phone calls to come. And the client side is the person ringing in. All right, so they're the active person that actually makes the connection to the server. So once the connection is actually made, the actual protocol is where the client will send a request and says, "Can you please get me this web page or this particular web object or other kind of resource?" And then the web server will go and look at its hard drive, try to find what that resource is, and return it. And so when it returns it, it also returns it with that particular format as well. It returns a response message. And it goes back to the browser. And then the browser will display it for people. So this happens every time we go to a web page. All right, let's go to the next page, Marty. Right, so diving a little bit deeper, we want to look this week at what the actual contents of the request and the responses are. So these are straight from Wikipedia. There's no real secret to them. But the really interesting thing is that because these protocols tend to be older, you can look at the way that they design the protocols. And back then, this kind of generation of protocols like email, SMTP, FTP, that's file transfer protocol, sorry, and a few of the others, they're all very text-based. So HTTP is very text-based. So in the request, it's actually a text request that goes through. And so if you're using Wireshark or other kinds of sniffing software, you can actually read the messages that go through. And so inside this request, the first line is very special in terms of it. It's actually the command, what is the request doing? Can we get something? So originally, there were two very kind of like popular kinds of requests. So there was the GET request, and we'll talk a little bit about the POST request later. But in recent times, the types of requests have expanded. And people have started using the REST protocols and other kinds of things. And so there's other types of requests that would get sent through HTTP. But the original ones were the GET requests. So usually it's the type of request, and then the next thing it would ask for is the actual resource that you want. So in this case here, is this asking for the default web page and the slash, if people know Linux. Let's say this is the root, the default root object that we're asking for. And then the final thing after that is HTTP 1.1, and that's just saying the version of HTTP that the request is for. So that very first line is kind of special. It's always going to be the command, the requested object, or the request resource, and then the version of HTTP. But then after that, you can see there's a whole bunch of other text lines, and they all have a particular format. It's key colon value, right? So the first one, it's like host and www.example.com. The next one's user agent and Mozilla, and then there's a few accept ones, and then connection one. Now, each of these different things are almost like flags or options, or different bits of information which your browser is actually sending to the web server to say something about themselves. So in particular, one of the things is the user agent. So the user agent is actually your browser, right? So your browser has an identification. And so I think Mozilla tends to be like Firefoxy type stuff, and also all of the browsers that have kind of like part of that particular family. And of course, I think Chrome has its own, Safari has its own, those kind of things. So they'll have different user agents. They'll say different versions of them as well. And it's basically to tell the web server, hey, this particular browser is connecting to you. And then so if the web server is smart enough, or the people who have written the programs on that side, they may send back a different version depending on the web browser that you have. Of course, nowadays everything's pretty standardized. Most of the browsers behave in the same way, but for a little while, each of the browsers do kind of act a little bit differently. So it's a good idea for your browser to actually tell the server, hey, I am Safari. Can you please send back the information for Safari, please? So that goes through. And then the accept and the accept language and the accept encoding basically give the web server information about what the browser can do. It can display text, it can display pictures, it can, the font language is English, British English in this case. So that it knows what kind of things to send back. And then the other very interesting thing is the last bit here in this example. It's connection keep alive, and this talks about the lower level types of HTTP connections. In the old days, the connection will always be closed after a request and response, but this is very inefficient because quite often a lot of data needs to come down on the line, so it's better to keep the connection alive. And then, so this is only a small sample of what a request looks like. sometimes requests can have a lot more options that get sent back and forward. Yeah, so sometimes it is also interesting. People don't realize that your browser is giving a lot of information away to the web server about itself, right? So people might not want the web server to realize, oh, I'm using Firefox or I'm using Chrome, but it is all information that's part of helping the system display the web pages correctly, kind of thing. So that's the HTTP request for now. We'll come back to it maybe more. Marnie, next one, please. So the next thing we're going to look at is the second type of message, and that's the response. So the response has a particular format as well, and it also basically is information to tell the web browser how to display stuff on the screen. So it helps a little bit. So the very first line, again, the very first line is a special line. It says the HTTP version, and then it gives a status number. So usually 200 is okay, so everything's fine. But if there's been some kind of problem, such as someone's typed in the URL incorrectly and the web server hasn't been able to find the resource that's been requested, you might get a 404, web page not found, or 403 forbidden. Maybe there's a permission issue down there, or if there's some kind of web server programming issue, you might get a 500 server error that comes back. So this first line basically gives us the status of the query or the request that's being made. And so most of the time, though, the query is successful. Sometimes there's also a redirect. So a 300 type message, 301, will come back, and that will ask the browser to ask for another web page. So redirect to another web page. So and that's a fairly legitimate type thing. All right, so other kinds of things. So you can see it's the same header type information, value equals key, or key equals value, sorry. So the date will actually say, how old the resource is that, or what the date on the resource is that you're getting. And I guess this is from Wikipedia again, so it's pretty old, 2005. But things haven't changed too much, really. The content type is interesting because it actually tells the browser what type of content it is. Right? So in this case here, it's text content. But you could easily say this is a JPEG file or a PNG file or something like that. And then so the browser then knows, I got to display this as an image, or display this as text, or interpret it as text. So it's also interesting in terms of people changing this value, or if it's labeled incorrectly, then the browser treats the content differently. So yeah. So the content length is how long it is, last modified. The other interesting thing here is the server. So you get an idea of the version running on the server as well, and the operating system that's happening there as well. I think this is something that can be configured at the web server end, so they don't necessarily have to say the truth. But again, yeah, in terms of trying to make sure that web pages are rendered correctly on both sides, the browser and the web server, do tell each other about what's there, just so that they can accept things. There's a few more other tags, other header information that probably isn't so important, but most of it's all there for rendering the web page. And then of course the last one is the connection closed, just to say, you can close the TCP connection now and keep on going. So the really main difference between the request and response is that after a blank line in the response, the actual content that is to be displayed appears, right? So you can see inside here, we've asked for a HTML page, and you can see the HTML code comes back, and then it's up to the browser to interpret the HTML code and display it on the screen for the user to see. So it doesn't have to be HTML code. It could be a JPEG file, or image or a sound file or a video file, anything, right? So yeah, so this content after the first line doesn't have to be text. It can be binary as well. And then because we've had the metadata inside the header there, then the browser knows how to display it. All right, hopefully that makes sense, and possibly many of you already know this. Let's go to the next page. Right, so one of the things that happened when the web first came out, and I'm showing my age now. I think if I had hair, it would be grey. So back in the day, when HTTP first came out, that was pretty much it. Requests, responses, and everything was quite static, and it was all usually one way. Okay, it would always be about downloading data from the web server. But it kind of got pretty boring, and people were starting to say, well, we want the web to be a little bit more interactive. We already have a static downloadable protocol called file transfer protocol, in which we can just download static files, and that's what it was, right? But for the web, they wanted to do something more. So people started thinking, well, is there a way we can send interactive data up to the web server and then have the web server send something back? So there's different methods for sending that information, and so we're going to talk about that now. Next slide, please, Marnie. All right, so the traditional way of doing it is using forms. I mean, nowadays there's other ways of doing things as well, but most of the time there's a traditional form. So nowadays we've got JavaScript and other kinds of things we can send data up to the web server in other ways. But traditionally we have a tag inside HTML, and it's called the form tag. And inside the form tag, we've got some other tags like input tags, and you can see here, we can submit a person's first name, last name, and email address, and then one of the tags will be a button there, a submit query, and then of course the user's supposed to fill everything in and hit the button, and then it sends all this information back to the web server. But how does it send it back? Let's go to the next page. So most of the time nowadays, everyone should be using the post method. So I guess if you've done any web programming, or if you need a web reference, the W3 Schools webpage, which I got this from, is the place to go. Awesome reference, lots of examples, allows you to test things. So, and I'm sure that you guys all who teach into IT will know all this stuff as well. So anyway, the post method is used to send data to the server, and the data is sent with a post command. So before we had the get command, and that's part of the HTTP request. Now the trick is when you post data to send the data up, it actually appears after the HTTP request. There's a space, and then there's a place for you to place post data. Okay, so inside the request, the data that you send back up to the web server is always key equals value or name equals value, and usually if you're going to send more than one parameter up, it'll be separated by an ampersand. Right? So the post requests don't remain in browser history. They can't be bookmarked. They have no restrictions on data length. So they can just be sent up as soon as you hit the submit button. And it just sends it up. But the request itself looks like a normal request, except at the top it says post, and then after all of the header information, there's the gap, and then there's the parameters that are sent up. Now, each of these parameters actually are labeled as part of the input fields inside the form. So if Marnie goes back and we look at the form, backwards. Oh no, it's too much. No, that was forward. Backwards. No, we can't go backwards. No. Oh, sorry, Marnie, it was too much. I won't do it again. All right, but you can see inside here, inside the input. Thanks so much. Sorry. So inside the input type, you can see the input type text. It's got a name. So that name, first name, last name, and email. The name equals first name equals last name equals email. That is the parameter that gets sent. And then the value that gets sent is whatever the user's typed into the field. Okay, so first name, they might have typed Ernest in. So then in the bottom there, it'll say first name equals Ernest, right? Because that'll be what value Ernest has typed in, and it goes up. And then, of course, last name will be whatever the person's typed in the last name, and it goes up. Ironically, you can actually set a value or a fixed value inside the submit button as well. And so you could send up information, submit buttons, and other kinds of buttons, and hidden fields, and a whole heap of other things that you can do. All right, next, let's go to post. And then, so this is, and you can see name equals value should be like first name equals Ernest, last name equals Fu, or whatever, how it sets it up. So post is not the only method. There is another method, which is more commonly used in the past and still used nowadays, but maybe not so much used. And that's the get method. So inside the get method, we have what's known as the query string, which is all the name value pairs. And instead of having it as part of the request, well, it is part of the request, but it's part of the URL. Okay, so if you look at the URL, you can see that it's attached to the end of the URL. So you can see here we've got demo form question mark and then name equals value after that, name 2 equals value 2, that kind of stuff. So the thing with GET requests is that can be cached, they can remain in the browser history because they're part of the URL, right? They can be bookmarked as well because when you bookmark things, you bookmark the URL, it gets saved inside there. However, there are bad things about using the GET request, and so that's why I kind of recommend people not directly to use it, and that's because if you're going to put sensitive data in there, it will appear and be visible to users, okay? And the other thing is GET requests are limited by the maximum length of URLs. So I believe URLs have like a maximum length 256 or something characters or something like that. So GET requests will be restricted there. That's not to say people don't use them. And in fact, even with this webinar, if you look at the URL, and I'm looking now and I can see that it does have some GET parameters inside there as well. Right? And a lot of them don't mean anything. I'm looking at the one that's there and it says key equals something and token equals something. And then there's this a whole bit of like random strings afterwards, right? So yeah, but those key values and token values actually reference a much larger system at the other end. So anyway, this is different ways to set things up. So in terms of security, you're probably wondering. So look, both of the methods of uploading the data are not like super secure in terms of, well, the GET method. If you're sending data with the GET method, people can edit the values in the URL, of course, before they submit it. So if you kind of doing some hacking into web pages and you just see some parameters going up, you could possibly change the values of those, and values could, your altered values can go up. It's very annoying for people who are doing web development. They might have spent ages doing validation of input data on the field, and then someone just sees the data at the top and just edits it to whatever they want, and then it goes up into the web server through the GET parameter. So people would be thinking, wow, the post method must be super secure because I can't see it. I can't edit it in the URL. It'll be secure, but it's not really, because as we'll talk about a little bit later, if you've got the right tools, certainly you can see the values if we're using the Wireshark tool that we talked about last week, because you look at the request and you can see the query string going up. And then if you use the tools that we're going to talk about today, Burp Suite, you can actually edit it as well, and it will send an edited version of the parameters up. So yeah, I mean, I guess that's just something to realize. We do need to send information up to the server somehow. All right, next, I think that's all I was going to say about these two things. Yeah. Now, one of the things when people were developing HTTP was, so certainly initially it was very static, kind of boring. Then now if we put in forms, it's exciting because we can start inputting data, right? But one of the other things that made the original HTTP protocol kind of boring was the fact that it was stateless. So what stateless means is that for every request, the web server would forget. It wouldn't maintain state. It would forget about the response that it sent, right? So it's kind of like a goldfish in terms of every time it sees a request, it would do what it needs to do for the request, and then it would forget it did it, right? And then it would go on to the next request, and then find whatever it needs to do for that, and then send it out, and then gets the next request, and it would forget about everything that's happened in the past. And this was kind of fine if we're just doing simple stuff like returning static web pages. But if we wanted to customize a web page for a particular person or things like that, things that we commonly see in, say, social media applications or email applications, or even just logging into like this teleconference or other kinds of things, HTTP needs to remember state. It needs to remember that these particular people have connected to this website before, and because I remember them, I can customize this web page that gets sent out to that particular person. Right? This is the thing that really made the web take off. Right? So how do we remember state if the original protocol doesn't do it? Let's go to the next page, please, Marty. Nope, too far. Going to talk about cookies now. So I did mention about cookies last week. So I have to stop the slides and go back. Oh, it's me. So yeah, I think people didn't really used to know about cookies, but very famously, some privacy legislation that was developed in European Union required people to have a choice about whether they used cookies or not. And so pretty much websites all over the world followed this standard because they didn't want to get fined by the European Union. So yeah, you'll go to web pages and they'll say, do you want to allow cookies from this web page? Now, most people will go, cookies? I have no idea what that is. Sure. And most of the time people will go yes because they want the web page to work. Right? Sometimes web pages don't necessarily work very well without cookies. Right? So what cookies are is basically a mechanism for maintaining state. Oh, it's going to come back up. Yay! Thanks, Marty. You're super. So this was the slide that I showed last week, and it's basically a sequence of messages, and I repeat it again in my following slides. But the browser sends a request, and the request has that format, the GET thing, and it has all the header information inside there. It goes to the web page. The web page will actually look at the request and say, hang on, one of the headers that I'm looking for is missing. There's no cookie header here. And then so that means that this browser, this particular person or this particular browser has never connected to me before, right? So then what it'll do is it'll send a response back, and inside the response, it'll have a special, or maybe even a set of special headings inside there. So you remember back to the response before, both the response and the request actually have header information. So the one that we're looking for here is set cookie. And basically what cookies are, and I know there's a story behind it. I think there's like, it's really interesting, all the terminology that's around in the internet, because I think that they're all named after pretty innocuous little things. So it may just have been a cookie was a small piece or something. And so that's why they called it a cookie. I'm not sure. But anyway, but the cookie actually is a small piece of information that's sent by the server in that second message there back to the browser. And the browser, because it's kind of complicit in this thing, will save that information, right? It'll save that information underneath the URL for this server. So then the next time the user, the person operating the browser, goes to that URL or to that web page, and depending on the settings on the cookie, of course, it will send back the same information, right? And so this way, the server, once it sees in the request a cookie header information, it will say, hey, you've been here before. And so there might be some settings such as, oh, well, you prefer the English language. But the other thing that it can send, and quite often cookies are used to send, is a token that allows the web server to look up in a database all the information about that person that's logged on, right, previously. So in this case here, we've got a PHP ID, and it's just a random number. But on the server, associated with that random number, that PHP ID, is a whole set of other values. It might have my name, it might have my email address, it might have, other kinds of preferences, or like, maybe I like the color blue, so the background should be blue when it displays the page the next time, that kind of stuff. So, yeah, and then the server is able to look up that information. Let's go to the next page, please, Marnie. Nope. I thought there was a few other slides in there.
There is. It's just having a bit of a moment right now with my slide ordering. So.
Oh, that's okay. So, so the next slides that are kind of there or not there, just to go down a little bit deeper to look at the settings, and yeah, so cookies have become really, really important in web pages. So here's an example, of setting some cookies. The really important thing about this one is the second one. When you set the cookies, you'll notice that there's an expiry date on it. So sometimes cookies live for short periods of time, and sometimes cookies live for a long time, right? So sometimes people call these cookies that last for a short period of time, say, session cookies. So session cookies might expire every time the connection gets closed, right? But it doesn't necessarily have to do that. So you can have an expiry date of, like, say, 2021 or wherever, and it might be years afterwards. So this is why one of the other things that you might have realized is that cookies can actually hold credentials. Does that make sense? Not necessarily the username and password, but basically a security token that says this person has previously authenticated themselves to the system, allow them in, right? So if someone is able to obtain the cookie information and replay the cookie information, they would be able to impersonate that person, depending on how long the expiry date is. Okay, so some things like, say, Gmail or Facebook. I think I don't use Facebook at all, but my wife does. And the other day she's going, oh, I've forgotten my Facebook password, because every time she accesses Facebook, the credentials go across. She doesn't have to type in the username and password, right? Until at some stage, for some reason, maybe she went on holiday or whatever, she hadn't logged out. The cookie expired, and then it just prompted her for username and password. It's like, oh no, what was it again, right? So sometimes that happens. Like I think Gmail's very, very much like that as well. If you're regularly re-looking it up. The expiry date gets refreshed. You never have to put in your username, password, the credentials through. So anyway, this is setting the cookie, and then if possibly, Marnie, we can go to the next page. Yeah, so this time, every time we go to the same web page, the cookie information gets all wrapped up into one tag. As you can see here, you're setting different values, but here it all gets wrapped up into one, and then it just sends that value back every time, just to maintain state, if that makes sense. So again, there are different settings for cookies as well, in terms of you can set it so it's very specific to this particular HTML web page, but sometimes you can set cookies so that anytime you go back to the whole domain, like, you know, facebook.com or whatever, send the cookie, right? So it doesn't necessarily have to be that spec.html file that you want to send. It might send it to anything within that domain, and the cookie might get set, right? So again, this is totally up to how the programmers want to set up their application. And quite often, programmers don't think about the security or even how cookies work. And so that whatever the default settings, even by the programming language, is what we use, right? Who is to know that PHP cookies last 24 minutes? Why? I have no idea. But that's the default setting on PHP cookies, unless you reset it somehow. And even the programming languages themselves have hidden the capabilities of cookies away from the programmer, right? So they've made the cookie mechanism look to the programmer like you're just saving a variable, right? And then you can always recall the variable afterwards under certain conditions, but the actual mechanism that they're using to do it is the cookie mechanism that I talked about, right? But to the programmer, they're thinking they're saving this variable, and then they're retrieving the variable afterwards. Okay, when in actual fact the variable is stored within an internal mechanism that is referenced by an ID that is stored on the cookie. All right, so yeah, it's interesting how the mechanisms have been hidden. All right, next, please, Marnie. All right, so we talked about that cookies are very important in terms of the security mechanisms. Again, they're valuable because they hold credentials, right? And yeah, so every time that you log into somewhere, the cookie that you hold tells the other system at the other end that you've validated yourself and you're authorized to access all of these web pages, all the pages that you see after you log in. Okay, that's usually what happens. There are other mechanisms though, and there are some other mechanisms that are kind of interesting as well. So within a lot of these are within the header. So one of the special types of headers information is the HTTP referrer. And again, on the internet, it's actually REFER with one R .er afterwards. Your spell check will probably say there's a double R inside there, but it's weird because programmers can't spell. When they make the standards, they spelt it wrong. And then when they anointed the standards, they didn't change it. So then, of course, now it's forever spelled incorrectly for all time. So if you look inside the headers and there's a referrer field, the referrer field will usually have a web page or even a domain name inside there. Okay. Why is there a referrer field? Let's go to the next page, Money. So the HTML referrer field is an absolute or partial address of the web page that makes the request. So while the referrer header can have benign use for things such as analytics, knowing what journey a visitor took to visit the site, it can be very revealing about the context, in the context of online tracking. Right? So the referrer is one way. Third parties can work out where people have been. For example, display ads, right? So I guess we'll talk about the evilness of the referrer field first, and that is all to do with tracking, right? So you'll notice that if you go to web pages, sometimes you'll see a little bird symbol or a little F symbol for Facebook, a little bird symbol for Twitter. You know, I don't know if there's other, like a little camera one for Instagram, I think it is. These little tokens that appear on these little icons that appear on the screen are there for convenience, I guess, for people to post something about web pages or things like that. But inevitably, if you looked at the URL for those icons, the web page has to retrieve that URL from the original web page from Facebook. Right? So whenever you go to display a page which has the Facebook icon on it, your browser has to go to Facebook and get the picture of the F and print it on the screen. Okay. So every time you do that, you're telling Facebook, and using the referrer field anyway, is to say that I have visited this website. Okay, because to Facebook, what they'll get is they'll get a request from the referring web page. So if, say for example, Bob's tires, I have to get new tires. So anyway, Bob's Tires, whatever. If I go to the Bob's Tires website and it's got a Facebook picture on it, right, and I retrieve the Facebook picture from Facebook, my request message that goes to Facebook that says, "Hey, I need your logo," will actually have a referrer field that says Bob's Tires. You know, the Bob's Tires kind of like website. So then that way, Facebook knows that I don't even have to click the link because it just has to be displayed, right? Facebook knows that I've been to that website. Okay, and this is how Facebook and Google and all these other companies, that's how they know I've been places, because I go to websites that have these little logos on it, and then they're able to track me. And I suppose one of the tricky things is that at least the logos I can see, right? And so if I know, then I go, well, okay, I accept that that's the case. But you can also track people and do analytics without showing the logo. What you can do is you could make an image that's 1 pixel by 1 pixel, like a white dot that appears on the page somewhere, right? And as a person with like a high resolution screen, I'm not going to be able to see, and a high resolution screen, really old eyes, I'm not going to be able to see that 1 pixel that's white on white somewhere on the screen, right? But the browser knows, because the browser has to go and retrieve that pixel and render it on the screen. So whoever owns that 1 by 1 pixel, they'll know that I've been to that website. Okay. So I guess very often, possibly often, that's how Google Analytics or other kinds of organizations are able to track where you've gone. Okay. So that's the, I guess, the evilness of the referrer field. The good. Why is the referrer field good? Okay. If you check the referrer field, you can actually say, hang on, I only want people who have come from a particular website to access my website. Okay, so it's a secondary check, especially if I've got an internal website somewhere and I want to make sure that only people who've already been to an internal website can come to this website. So you can restrict it that way. You can also use it to protect against some other kinds of like cross-site request forgery type attacks. So, I mean, I guess maybe that topic might be beyond us at the moment, but it's a special kind of attack where you can trick people into going to particular website from a malicious website. So, and so because of that, you could actually use the referrer field to match up and say, is this a legitimate request? Now, this is if you're a web server, of course, not necessarily a web browser, but the web servers can say, is this a legitimate request? Or is this a request that's come from a known phishing website or not? Right. So if there are a blacklist of known bad websites and you're getting requests coming in from there, you could actually block them and say, no, you can't come in here. You can't access, if you're a bank or whatever, you just say, no, if you're coming from a known phishing website, I'm not going to let you access, financial statements or anything like that. So referrer fields are good. So they're good and they're bad. Okay. All right, next page, please. All right. Now, sometimes cookies are, well known to people, and so you don't necessarily have to use the cookie field. Okay. Sometimes you can use other token headers as well. So people and some web pages do. This means people have got pretty sophisticated web pages. You can actually set up on your server and have a matching thing in the browser as well to generate a custom header information. So in this case here, we've got a XSRF token or X security token. And so you could set up a security token instead of using cookies if you want. And the security token would be like just a value that's been previously set that gets returned to you. And so people are customizing using custom headers instead of cookies to be able to allow authentication to happen. Right? So, and again, it's just putting things to the side to make it much more customized. It makes it really hard for attackers who have got a methodology for accessing and finding cookies. It makes it just a little bit harder for them, right, to be able to overcome that. So there are secure token headers out there as well, but it is very customized. So you'd have to program them differently and program them specifically within the web application to check and generate them. But yeah, and that was a little thing about secure token headers. But as we see from people who are doing the web challenge, if you know about the secure token header, you can also spoof it as well. So yeah. All right. Yeah, maybe that's it for this one. Let's go on to the last bit, which I'll go through quickly. All the students who are looking at the second round, you'll see that there's a piece of software that's been installed called Burp Suite. Now, Burp Suite is a reasonably famous web hacking, web pen testing software that's out there. It's got a paid version and a free version. The one that we've installed is the free version. And yeah, I guess we can encourage students to explore and use it. You don't have to use it to complete the challenges. In fact, when I was putting the challenges together, I just couldn't be bothered installing it. So I used just extensions that were freely downloaded. I just used extensions instead to get through the challenges. But I'll talk to you guys about the Burp Suite one. So definitely all the challenges are doable using Burp Suite. Let's go to the next slide, Money, please. What is Burp Suite? Well, it's a penetration testing tool for web pages. It's basically set up as a web proxy between the web browser and the web server. And the really good thing is that it can manipulate requests and responses that we've been talking about before. So you can see the little diagram here. What if people don't know what a proxy is? A proxy is something that stands for somebody else. So I guess I don't even know where we use proxies other than on computer systems, but shares. Like, I think if you have shares, you can be a share proxy where you send somebody in your stead, right? So this is what the proxy does as well. The browser will, instead of sending the request to the server directly, it sends it to the proxy. And then the proxy can then pass it on to the server, and then the responses that come back goes to the proxy, and then it goes through the proxy back to the browser. So a good thing about the proxy in between, and this is what Burp Suite is, it will allow you to stop the request that goes through before it actually gets to the server, and it'll also stop the response that comes back. All right, let's go to the next page, please. So when you fire up Burp Suite, this is a very old version of Burp Suite. The new version looks so much nicer, but some of the headings are pretty much still the same. At the very top there in the red box, but you'll find that Burp Suite is actually a suite of tools all joined together. Each one of those little tabs is kind of like one of the tools, I guess, or utilities that are joined together within this one program. Box number 2 is associated with the Burp Suite spider. And what the spider does is it actually goes, once you point it at a website somewhere, it tries to map that website. You know, what are all the other pages on the website? What are all the directories on the website or whatever? And it takes some time to do that, but when it does eventually do that, it plants that map in that window there. We don't have any really complicated web pages, so in round 2, but you know, if people were to point it at somewhere else, they'll see those things. Box number 3 is your request that gets sent through, and box number 4 is box number 3 will show all of the requests. So usually you might not realize when you go to get a web page, it's not a single file, right? It's there is a single file to rule them all, which is the HTML page, but then inside the HTML page, every image, every wave sound thing or video or GIF file is a separate HTML request. So in box number 3, you'll see all of the ones associated with the web page that you can see, right? And then, of course, in box number 4, it will show the raw request and response, right? Just like what we've shown in the slides before. You'll see the get thing in the first line, you see all the header information and other stuff inside there. All right, so before we go to the next page, I just want to talk about the things across the top. So target is the default one. So usually the target is where you just point it to some web page and it does the analysis. The proxy is the thing that we will probably use the most, and the proxy is about setting up how does it sit between the browser and the server. We've got a spider and a scanner. I don't think those are there anymore. There's an intruder which does vulnerability analysis on a web page. We don't really need to use that for us. There's a repeater, and you could use the repeater. What the repeater does is it allows you to capture a request and, oh, surprise, repeat the request. So it's possible that you might want to use this for the challenge, but really we only really need the proxy. There's a sequencer that allows you to sequence up a number of requests. The decoder is a very helpful mechanism, like it's a really tiny little utility, but it allows you to do base 64 decoding. And base 64, like we were talking about originally, is just everywhere on the internet. But the decoder also does HTML decoding as well. So sometimes you can convert HTML, like special characters, into other HTML-friendly characters, and so the decoder helps you to encode and decode that in a convenient spot, rather than having to get another application. It's just a tab up here. Comparer allows you to compare requests and responses. Extender allows you to add plugins in. We don't need to do any of that. Options and alerts, right? We don't need to do any of those things. So once you do click one of those ones across the top there, you do get a secondary menu. And so like the sitemap scope is associated with target. And then proxy is where one would be looking at. So maybe the next slide is all about the proxy. So when you hit proxy, there's different options: intercept, HTTP history, WebSockets history, and options. Inside the options, it tells you how the proxy has been set up. And so what you can do is you can go to your browser and set up the proxy within the browser options, and you point it to the interface here. Okay. And so that's the localhost interface on port 8080 is the default one. And of course, you can turn it off if you want by hitting the running button and turn it off. Or you can set up a different interface if you go other interfaces. So this was particularly tricky for early versions of Burp Suite, but the current version of Burp Suite actually has a built-in browser called Chromium inside it. So you could actually just launch the instead of using your normal browser, you can just launch the Chromium browser that's built into Burp Suite and open another window. It'll be just a Chrome browser. Now, how do you do that? Well, I don't have the screenshot for it, but on this page, there's a button that says launch browser, and you just hit that button and it launches the browser and allows you to use it. And you don't have to worry about setting up all the settings and stuff. It just automatically uses the proxy. Okay, but the other menu on here that's really important is the intercept menu. So the intercept menu is where you allow the system to intercept your requests and responses. Right? The histories. Oh yeah. Okay, so you can go in here. Thank you, Marty. Inside the intercept one, you can either turn on or off intercept. So intercept, of course, means once you collected it, you stop the message from going through. And so it's really good because you can see what the request is that's coming through. You can see what the response is that's coming back. I don't have the screenshot of it, but there's a tick box down the bottom to say, I want you to stop the requests, the responses, or you can untick it and the responses just automatically go back to the browser. There's a button that's grayed out here called forward, right? So once you've intercepted it, right, it'll be in that little window just underneath here that you can't see. But then you might say, okay, I'm happy with it. I've read it now, and now I want you to go to the web server. So that forward button is the button you hit to release that request off to the other end. Depending on how complicated the website is, though, there might be a lot of components to that web page, so you'll be hitting forward a whole bunch to, like, if there's 50 pictures, you have to hit forward 50 times. After that gets really boring, you just go intercept off. So you hit the intercept is off button and it just releases the rest of the things through, right? But there's also the option to drop it. So you could get the request to come through and you might say, no, I don't like that request, and you drop. Okay, and that means it won't get sent on. It'll just get deleted. Right? So the other thing, though, is the HTTP history, which I don't have a picture for. But if you click that, it's got a window which shows a history of all of the previous requests, right? So you can go back and look at some of the previous requests inside there as well. If you go to those ones, if you right-click on the request, there's an option there to either send it to the intercept list or send it to the repeater. So each one of these intercepted requests, you can send it to the repeater one. And then you go to the repeater tool and you'll see a whole bunch of requests, which you can then do stuff with, like repeat them. Right? Now, one of the other cool things about Burp Suite is that once you've intercepted the request and you have the window, guess what? You can click on the window and you can edit the request. Right? It's just like a normal editor. You can just delete stuff, add stuff, whatever. And then when you're happy with the editing, you can go forward and it forwards that request. Right? So it does make the web challenge quite easy, but you have to maybe get some experience in terms of manipulating. And I think the whole web challenge for round 2 is about manipulating or showing students that they can manipulate the response and requests, and they're not restricted to just using a web browser. Okay, let's go to the next slide, please, Marty. All right, this is the bigger picture. I didn't realize I had one. But yeah, so you can see the request inside there. You can click the forward button to make it keep going. You can view the request inside that window. And then you can edit the requests. there's a little button down the bottom. You can see little arrows and stuff like that. You can actually scroll through all of the requests that you've intercepted along the way as well, because Burp Suite remembers them all, so you can go back and forward between them, or you can add a new request if you want to as well. Okay. Yeah, so I think that's all. I think I was talking about that before I showed it. So yeah, that's pretty much it for tonight, I guess. Were there any questions? I know Peter knows all about Burp Suite already, but maybe some of the others might not have known.
So yeah, so very much we'll open the floor. If there are any questions about the content of PD or the content of round 2 or just ASCC in general, feel free to ask them. Otherwise, we will wrap up.
I was going to say to all the teachers out there that we did give you a round 2 virtual machine as well. So you guys can connect to the round 2 virtual machine. I know the round 1 one, I didn't put all the challenges there for the teacher version, but for the round 2 one, kind of got lazy. And so I gave you guys all the same challenges as the students have. So you guys can muck around with it as well if you like. Burp Suite is there. There is a target for the web challenges, and you can do all of these things as well if you wish. Sorry, Manny.
It's all good. So yes, so slides and recording will be released later in the week, which I do believe I need to talk to Roscoe about things tomorrow. So, but yeah, no, we will have the slides and such all out this week as well.
Yeah, look, I think the web challenge, it will be eye-opening for the students who've never kind of done that kind of stuff before. Of course, if students have played around with these kind of things, it might be quite straightforward. But yeah, hopefully it's educational.
So, any further questions?
Thanks, Peter.
I will take some of the silence that people are still typing, or that we don't have any questions. So in that case, we will finish up for the evening. Thank you so much for attending this PD. The next PD will be on the 7th of May, so not for a little while yet, not until we kick back in for term 2. As I know, we are slowly but surely itching closer to the end of term 1. So yeah, next PD will be in term 2. Obviously, this will be the round 3 PD, but the content itself is highly informational. So these are obviously open regardless of whether your teams have made it through to the round or not.
Yeah, more than welcome for teachers to attend the next PD if you're interested in what happened in round 3, even if none of your teams make it through. I think what's it down to for round 3?
So we drop to our top 16 teams, and then the final.
Yeah, it's a big filter at that point.
So was PD different to last one? I'm assuming we're talking about last week's PD. Yes, so last week's PD was about Wireshark, which is what the students will also be using as part of round 2. The next PD will also be different. It will cover the round 3 content, which is very different, obviously, to our round 2 stuff. So yeah, first PD was primarily Wireshark and network cycle analysis. The video should be out, but if it is not, please let us know, and I will double check with Roscoe about where that one is at. Not yet. Okay. I will speak with Ross in the morning then and work out where that is. But otherwise, there is a really good video regarding Wireshark and resources as part of the student resources for round 2 that covers a lot of the basic stuff that they're going to be looking at and using. Been very much probably similar, maybe not as detailed, obviously, as PD, but enough that the students have enough of direction that gives you a bit of an idea while we get these PD recordings out. So if that is everything, feel free to continue asking questions. But otherwise, if you would like to get back to the normality of life. Thank you so much for attending, and we shall see you in the next PD.